Good morning, everybody. Are you able to hear? Is the voice okay? Voice and video, is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let's proceed with what we were doing last time. We were looking at assembly programming of the MIPS processor. And the idea was that to learn the instruction set architecture, we ourselves need to be assembly programmers. Whatever an assembly programmer needs to know roughly defines the instruction set architecture, and we are looking at the instruction set architecture of the MIPS processor. We were trying to understand how the different instruction types are stored in the processor. The register type instruction, as shown here, we have the opcode 6 bits. Then we have two source operands. 5 bits is because of the 32 registers, and the destination operand 5 bits. And there is a function 6 bit. So there are variants of each operation, like add and subtract are variants. And there is a shift amount for shift type of instruction, logical shift. And then the immediate instruction, 16 bits are there for address part, and there are two operands, RS and RT. RS is the source operand and T is the destination operand. It would have been nice if they called it as RD, but for some reason it's called as RT. We'll look at the other types of instructions. So basically the immediate operands here are 16 bits. So what is the largest integer that we can store here? You know that each integer occupies 32 bits, 4 bytes. What's the largest integer operand that we may have? And remember, these are word addressable. So it is convenient to make the last 2 bits to be zeros, which need not be stored actually. And remember that the constant can be negative also. So these 16 bit can store positive as well as negative constants, and there are 16 bits. And fortunately, this is not a byte level representation, because we know that the lowest ones will be zeros. Okay, so just think about it. What is the most negative constant and the most positive constant that we store? And the load store here again 16 bits. So there is a base register and we take the offset of 16 bits. So what is the maximum offset value? And remember here that the offset here can be positive and negative. And the other thing is that here we specify byte address. In the load store, it's a byte address. Unlike a branch address, where branch is for instruction, here we branch to a specific instruction. We know that these are 4 bytes. So we can branch to some instruction only. So the last 2 bytes here, sorry, last 2 bits, that will be zeros. Last 2 bits of this, they need not be stored. So here we have 16 bits. And the last two bits are zeros, which are implicit in the processor. When we look inside the processor, we'll see that we will shift and add those two zeros here to the LSB. And then we have the address for the branch instruction. But for the load store, it is a byte address. So giving you this work to compute what is the longest or largest number of instructions to which we can branch. Because the branch can be positive or negative. Similarly, the constants and the load store. And remember, load store is byte address. But what about the jump instruction, the long jumps? Here it's slightly different. See here, this 6 MSBs are storing opcode, and basically the jump address is stored in these 26 bits. And when we actually do the jump, we need to get these 6 bits from the program counter and add it here. So it is not really a relative, it's not really a PC relative addressing. The branch is a PC relative addressing because this offset, whatever address we get here, the offset and base register, we add that to the PC. The address that we get, we add that to the PC. I think we had seen that last time. So that's a PC relative addressing. But what about the long jumps? The long jumps, just we get these 6 bits and just put it here, and the rest is in the target. This is the address. So it's not really a relative addressing. We don't add it. We just take the largest 6 bits. So we call it as the pseudo relative, pseudo PC relative addressing. It's not really a PC relative addressing. And the other thing to note here is that whatever address we get, so basically there is a range to which you can jump. So the range is defined by 0 to 26 bits. And also think about what is the largest range to which the jump will work, the long jump will work. But you might have a question that what if we write a large program, tens of thousands assembly instruction, and then how will the branch work there? Because here it is both positive, negative, offset, and also the 16 bits only. So on a first computation, 2 to the power 16, and then half goes positive, negative, offset. So it is 2 to the power 15, which is not a large number, something like 32,000 or something instructions, because this is not byte, fortunately, it's words. So the offset is in words here. But that is also not too large, because programs can be large, hundreds of thousand lines of code. And how do you jump? Will it work? Answer is yes. We can convert a branch into a long jump. We can combine these two. We'll just see an example today. Even though we'll not write such large programs here in this course, but just for our understanding that how it can be handled. Now let's look at some example formats. ARD is the opcode 0, and then the 3 registers are encoded here, and the shift amount is 0 for this instruction, doesn't matter, we don't use it. And 32 with 0 opcode implies add, and 34 with 0 opcode implies subtract. And the load word, check here, load word, 35 is the opcode, and then we have this base register as 18 and the offset as 100. So the base register is S2, which is 18, and S1 is the destination register, and the offset is 100. Now let's look at the jump instruction. As I was saying, that 26 bits are there for the jump address, and the rest of the 6 bits where the opcode is specified, that is obtained from the PC, and the MSBs here are appended to these 26 bits from the PC. The jump and link, we'll use today the jump and link for procedure call. And what is the maximum address range I was asking you to compute as homework. Now let's look at conditional statement. A C conditional statement, if I equal to J, then F is G plus H, else F is G minus H. And here, so this is basically a simple conditional statement. If I equal to J, then F is equal to G plus H, else F is G minus H, and then it exit. Now, before the code is executing here, we have these register storage of these variables. We have used load word or whatever, and we have loaded F variable in S0 register, G in S1, H in S2, I in S3, and J in S4. Now, what will be the MIPS code? How do we write the MIPS code for this? Okay, I and J are compared. I and J in S3 and S4. So branch not equal to is the instruction we use. If S3 is not equal to S4, we jump to else part. Otherwise, we do the addition G plus H and store the result in S0, that's F, and then jump to exit. Fortunately here, as I was saying, the assembler takes care of computing the exact address to put here. Otherwise, writing programs will be much more difficult if you really put the actual address, computing, counting the number of instructions and so on. And also each time you add an instruction or delete an instruction, you'll have to change the jump value. That will be extremely difficult. Fortunately, the assembler does that for us. Now let's look at a loop statement, simple loop statement. The problem here is that we have an array, we call it as marks array. And we have the student marks sorted here. There are many students who have got 100 out of 100. And then students have got 90, 85, 75, etc. Now we want to write this small program where we'll compute how many students have got 100. The C snippet for this will be while marks is equal to 100, I plus equal to 1. Now, how do we write the MIPS code? So here we have this loop setup here, jump to loop. And if the loop condition is satisfied, that is here we are checking, branch not equal to S5 stores 100. S5 stores 100, see here. And the address of the array is stored in S6. And I, which is both used as the loop variable and also the number of students who have got 100 mark, is stored in S3. Initially, S3 is 0. And in the loop, we are shift left logical, SLL, S3 and 2. These are the operands. So what will T1 contain? T1 will contain I into 4. So if the S3 register contains 1, then T1 will contain 4, because the addresses will be some base address and plus 0. That's the first one. Base address plus 4 is the second entry. Base address for plus 8 is the third entry. Base address plus 12 is the fourth entry, and so on. So each time we are multiplying I, which is stored in S3, by 4. That we achieve by doing SLL, $T1, $S3 and 2. And then we add the offset with the base register. The base register is in S6 to get the actual address. And just see here, the load word is taking byte address. That's why we had to multiply by 4. And here we get what was stored in the array into T0. And we check whether it is 100 or not. If it is not 100, we know that all the students have been examined. Those who have got 100, we have already taken care. And the first instance where we get a non-100 value, we go to exit. Otherwise, we increment I variable. So is the program working? Does anybody have any difficulty here? Simple, right? Okay. Anybody has difficulty, please let me know. If it is clear, it's simple program. Because remember, you'll have to write a test, a quiz in the coming Monday class. And the quiz will be about 14-15 minutes. We'll announce the exact time. And the main component of this will be lecture 7, 8, 9. The main components will be lecture 7, 8, 9, where we had started discussing about the MIPS instruction set architecture and assembly programming. Now let's look at the jump instruction. As I was saying that the jump instruction, there is a span of addresses to which we can jump. It's not PC relative, as I said earlier. Now let's assume the same code, what we had written the last slide, we've taken the same code. And the code is loaded at memory location 80,000. We have the shift left instruction. 80,004 is add instruction, etc., etc. And see here, the shift left and ARD both are arithmetic instruction with 0 as the opcode. I mean, they don't have to really remember the opcodes for the instruction. That we don't need. Even assembly programmer does not need, because you'll have to write assembly code and not machine code. But just out of curiosity, just saying that the ARD and the shift left, they both of them have 0 as the opcode, but the function type differs. The shift left has 0 as the function code and this has 32, and the shift amount is given here. Just check here 2. And similarly, you have load word, etc. Now we have jump loop, where the loop will be computed by the assembler and will be put here in this field. How much value will it put? Okay, the program is at 80,000, and as I was saying that in all jump instruction, branch instruction, etc., the lowest 2 bits, the least significant 2 bits are zeros and therefore not stored here. We just store here the word address 20,000, and therefore it will be multiplied by 4 and we get 80,000. And similarly, when we branch here, we can branch in this direction and we have 2 here, and that is again multiplied by 4. And but since this is a PC relative addressing, by the time the address is computed, the offset and base address is computed, that is 2 into 4 is 8. By that time, the PC is already incremented. I think somebody had asked me this question last class or before that when is the PC incremented? The PC is incremented immediately after the instruction is fetched and decoded, and therefore the PC value is 14 already, 80,014 already, and therefore to that we add here this 8 and we get 24. So this is the one to which it is jump. Now let's start writing some code for procedure call. We have written enough codes for simple 2-line codes, which is branches, that is conditional statements, loops, and writing statement for one conditional is good enough for writing for any conditional statement and loops. Now let's do the procedure calling, and we'll also write those code for loops, conditionals, and so on. Here, as we are saying, that the parameters are placed in these argument registers A0, A1, A2, A3. There are 4 registers. And we'll place the arguments here, the procedure arguments. But you may ask, sir, what happens if there are more than 4 arguments, etc.? Right now, we are looking at simple programming. Let's not burden our mind with more complex things. Let's understand this well. And then we can think of a function which has more than 4 parameters, which can be handled. But right now, let's not worry about that. And once we have put the parameters, now we can have the instruction jump and link. So first few instruction before procedure calling, we need to prepare. We have to put the parameters in the argument registers. And then we call JAL, jump and link. So that will transfer to the procedure. And inside the procedure, So just asking this question, what is the difference between jump J instruction and JAL? Can anybody answer? What happens, this difference between these two instructions, J and JAL? Can anybody answer? Remember, there are marks for answering. We note down the names.
So like the number of instructions uh, that can be jumped is different for both the versions.
So this is Ambuj, right?
Yes, sir.
Well tried, but sorry, no. That's not the main difference. J and JAL. See the word link there? What does
Sir,
link mean?
like when we use JL, it means a jump and link. We store the current address so that we can return to this address later.
Okay, where do we store? Vikram, good. Where do we store?
In registers, like
RA register. So,
yeah,
so there is a register 31, R31,
yes.
which we call RA return address. So link means we store the address so that we can come back. So that's the link established. So unlike J, which is a unconditional jump, we cannot come back. There is no link established in a simple jump. But in JAL, we link it so that we can come back, and we store the address of the present instruction so that we can come back, and that address is stored in a register address RA, which is register 31. We'll write the code and we'll see that. And once we are inside the procedure, if we want to disturb any saved register, then we'll have to push them onto the stack. So that's how we acquire the storage. We'll see in a small program now. And then we do the operations. And whatever we had pushed onto the stack, because the saved register we should not disturb. Otherwise, the calling procedure will get affected. Now we must restore back all those registers we had acquired, and then the return values are placed in these two registers, V0, V1. So you can have two return values, V0 and V1 register. And of course, you can ask, what if there are more values to be returned and so on? Let's not worry that right now. Let's write small programs that can be handled when we can want to return more values. And once we have stored the results in the V0, V1 register, we give this instruction JR. So JR register, it takes the saved PC value from the register 31 and then sets the PC to that value. So just to summarize, we have the arguments placed in A0 to A3. V0, V1 are the return values. And inside the procedure, we are free to use T0 to T9. These are temporary. Even we disturb these values inside the procedure, no problem. But S0 to S7, if we use inside the procedure, we must save the value that was there in a stack. And then before the procedure ends, we have to restore those values. So this is a discipline we have to follow religiously, because you may think that in my program I have not used S7 in the calling procedure and therefore I will use in the procedure itself. But then later you will get problem if you do that, because someday you may also use S7 in the calling procedure and you will forget here. So as a discipline, we'll always save these registers into the stack and restore them before returning the call. And GP is the global pointer for static data. In the small programs that we will write, we will not use static data, which are accessible to all programs. Global data or static data, we will not use them. The stack is where we'll store all these saved registers. We'll store in the stack, and you will use $SP as the stack pointer, which is the register 29, and we'll push to the stack. And see here, the register is only having the pointer where it will be stored, but where exactly is the values getting stored? It's in the memory. The values will be stored in memory, and the address of that memory location is given by the stack pointer. The frame pointer will not use, and of course the return address will be stored in RA, which is register 31. Now let's look at the jump and link. This is how we'll call the procedures, JAL, and we'll give a label of the procedure. And as soon as we give the instruction JAL, it's when it is executed, it will put the address of the instruction following this instruction in RA, because once we return, it will start executing from the next instruction. And then it does a simple jump to the target address. And while returning the procedure, we'll have JR. And when we do the JR, it will take the register, the saved PC in the RA, and it will jump to that. It will simply copy the array contents to the program counter. And also, if we write the switch statements, we'll use something like this. But in our simple discussion here, we will not use switch statements. Case switch statements will not use. We'll have simple if then else. How to use the array register for switches, etc. We will not discuss. Now let's look at the stack where the values are saved. The stack grows downward. So each time we want to save some value, we'll have to subtract 4 from the stack pointer. And that makes a place. When you subtract 4, the stack progresses downward by 1 word. And there we'll copy the value that we want to save into the stack. So the stack pointer at any time will show what was the last value that was saved. And if we want to delete some value, we'll read the value that the stack pointer is pointing to, and then we'll add 4 to the stack pointer. So the stack pointer always points to the top element of the stack. And now let's write a small procedure. Simple procedure. It's a leaf procedure, meaning that it does not call any other procedure. So this is a leaf example. Takes 4 parameters, 4 integer parameters, int g, int h, int I, int j. And GHIJ, before we can write the routine for the procedure, they will be available in A0, A1, A2, A3 registers that we had seen. And there is a local variable here as f. And f we can use as a temporary, one of the temporary registers. But just to illustrate how to use the saved registers, we'll use a saved register here. But before we can use the saved register, we have to push the current content of that register into the stack. And then we'll do this operation. We all know how to write assembly code for this. We had already written the same code for f is equal to g plus h minus I plus j. We'll first compute I plus j and g plus h in temporary registers, and then do a subtract operation and store f. And then we'll copy that into the V0 register. And then we call the JR. Now let's write the code, exact code. Before the code works, as I said that GHIJ must have been put in A0, A1, A2, A3 in the calling procedure. We should have this code. Now let's look at the procedure code. To write a procedure, we give a label first. The name of the procedure becomes the label here. And the first thing we do is the discipline of saving any saved register we want to use into the stack. We create a place on the stack by adding -4, add immediate -4. And then we store whatever was there in S0 into the stack. And then we have the procedure body here. In the procedure body, as I was saying that in T0, T1, G plus H, I minus J, etc., and then subtract. And we get the result in S0. And once we get the result in S0, we move to V0. How do we move? We write add V0, S0, and we take help of the 0 register here to move the content of S0 into V0. And then having done that, put the result in V0, we need to restore the S register. The saved register we need to restore as a courtesy to the calling procedure. Otherwise, the calling procedure will get wrong value. So we load word whatever is there on the top of the stack, load onto S0, and then we increment the stack pointer, because remember the stack was growing downward. Each time we create a place, we add minus, and each time we pop out from the stack, we add +4, and then we have jump, return array, JR, jump return from the array register return address, and it will go back to the calling procedure. So in this simple procedure example, does anybody have any doubt? We can discuss again. As I said, it's a simple thing. Just and here for this simple, we need not have saved the register content, just to illustrate that how saved register can be used. I have written this code, but we need not have these 4 lines. So it will basically be these 4 lines here shown in red. So that's the code for the simple leap procedure. Anybody has any difficulty here with this procedure example? We can discuss, otherwise we will write larger programs. Okay, no question from anybody. Good. Now let's write this program. Again, very simple function. We want to find the larger of 2 integers. X and Y are 2 integer arguments. And we want to return the larger of this. Simple C code. But how do you write the assembly code? Please think, or at least write or think that how do you write the code for this. If I simply describe this, it may not be very effective in the quiz, or maybe in the actual practice, you may not be able to write the code unless you actually write. And as I was saying the last class, that if we had a lab with this, or we had at least enough credit for this component, computer architecture component, much larger credit for this part, then we would have required you to download the SPIM assembler, saying that MIPS spelled backward is SPIM, and you can find it on the net. The SPIM MIPS assembler, download into your laptop or desktop and run your programs. That would give you much better understanding of how the assembly programmer works. But here we're just writing small assembly code because the credit is not that high. We cannot really burden you with the small number of credits to really run on the actual assembler downloaded from the net. But those who are really interested to pursue this line, you can download the SPIM assembler from the net, write the code that we are writing here, and there you need a few assembler directives and easily find on the net, like variables you can name there and so on. So it will be really nice if you can run the assembly codes that we are writing on the SPIM assembler. Now let's write the code for this. Find larger. How do we go about? The first thing we do is, okay, we use this as the label. Find larger is the label of our procedure. And then we use these argument registers A0, A1, where X and Y are stored. And we compare this branch not equal to, and we store in the V0 register either X or Y. That's simple for 5 lines code. Now let's look at the code. Okay. So find larger becomes the label. So we compare A0, A1, and we set T0 based on whether A0 is less than A1. So T0 will contain 1 if A0 is actually less than A1. Otherwise, it will contain 0. Now, if it is 0, branch equal to 0, we compare with R0 and T1. If it is 0, then we jump to the else part. Otherwise, in the if part, we just put A1 into V0, because that's how we'll return the result in V0 and find that A1 is larger. In the else part, we just put A0 into V0 and then we call the JR. Simple code. I hope everybody will be able to write. And the quiz next class, Monday. Okay, Monday we'll have, as I said, 7, 8, 9. I didn't say today's. So, okay, we possibly will exclude the procedure part from the quiz coming Monday, but simple assembly code we'll have in the quiz. But this we'll have in the next quiz and the procedure writing on next week Monday. So this coming Monday we'll exclude procedure writing. So far we have been looking at leaf procedures. Those who don't themselves call other procedures. But what if these are non-leaf procedures? They call other procedures, or maybe they're recursive procedures. They call themselves. How do we do that? Now, here here the caller needs to save the return address, because this will be the return address. See, here the procedure is getting called recursively. So we need to store the return address also, and the arguments, temporaries, etc. all need to be stored by the caller, because that will be overwritten. Once the procedure call is done, the return address will be lost. So we need to do this extra thing. And after the call, we need to restore that back. Now let's look at the simple recursive procedure call. Factorial takes one argument, integer argument, and the base case is if n is equal to 0, that is by definition 0 factorial is 1. So f will be 1, set to 1 if n is 0. If n is less than 1, this is the base case, and it will be set to 1. And otherwise, we will call recursively, multiply n with the value returned from the recursive call. And here, let's assume that n is in A0 register and result is available in V0. So here, as always, we'll have the address, the name of the function as a label here. So fact is the name of the procedure, made it into label. And now we need to store this return address and argument register. And here we have just one argument, and therefore we just store A0 register. We create space on the stack for two values to push, that is add immediate -8, and then we stored the return address and A0. And then we need to check for the base case where A0 is less than 1. And if it is less than 1, so it is 0, then we will store 1 in V0 and we'll restore the stack pointer and jump return JR. On the other hand, if it is non-zero, so basically n is not less than 1, we will jump to L1 label, and here in the L1 label we decrement n and call recursively the fact procedure. So jump and link fact, and then inside, as usual, we will store these A0 and RA, and then we will pop the two element from the stack. So we'll restore the original n and return address, and then we just do this multiplication, and then we'll jump return. So that is it. Please look through the code. It's slightly more complicated than the leaf procedures. The non-leaf procedure call, we need to do these adjustments here. In the calling procedure, we need to store. Each time we have the recursive call, we need to restore, and so on. Please read through the code, simple code, should be able to understand. Any questions here? So we almost done the basic assembly programming. We'll just take some examples. Before that, let's look at how character data is handled. You know that ASCII has 128 characters, out of which 95 are graphic symbols and 33 are control. And on the other hand, so this basically needs a byte basically, whereas the Latin character is 256. It has 96 more graphic characters that we call as the Latin set. So 2 bytes. ASCII 1 byte, Latin 2 bytes. But now, not only the English alphabet and the Latin, we need to support various types of world users, maybe Hindi, maybe Arabic, etc., etc. So nowadays, all programming languages, Java, C++, etc., they use the Unicode, which has 4 bytes, 32 bits. And here we can accommodate most of the world's alphabet and other symbols, mathematical symbols and so on. That's the Unicode. And with present programs being used worldwide, it is advantageous to use Unicode, because never know, your user of your program can be anybody. It should be able to support that in the your program, different languages. But does the Unicode make it incompatible with the ASCII and the Latin? Because remember, all old programs had only ASCII 1 byte, 8 bits. Fortunately, the way the Unicodes are designed, the Uniform Translation Format, I think that's the full form of UTF. So these are variable length encoding, and we don't use basically the 32 bits for all types of characters. If you are just using English, it will be wasteful to have all this 32 bits. So it's a variable length encoding. And the remember here, the first 8 bits here are ASCII. So it's compatible with the earlier one, ASCII code. And we have no difficulty when we compress. I mean, we just use English and we don't have any performance problem, penalty. We just use these 8 bits. And another thing we will like to mention before we write larger programs is about this address. See, many times we have address as operands, and the address, we want to jump to a specific address or something like that. So if we have stored the address in the memory, how do we load into a register? See, for immediate, we have 16-bit is for most of the small operations, we have 16 bits sufficient. But how do we load 32-bit into a word? Using a immediate addressing, we load only 16-bit. How do we load a 32-bit address or 32-bit argument into a register? Okay, we have this facility available where we have load upper immediate, LUI, and we give this constant which is 16-bit And in the destination register, which is called as RT here, target, the 16 bits are loaded in the topmost bits of the word of the register RT. So once we have LUI 61 that gets loaded here, and then we can do a simple OR immediate, and then we load the lower bytes. So this is a small trick we do here to load 32-bit values into a register. We'll use this very useful thing. LUI and ORI, load immediate, load upper immediate, and OR immediate. So these two we'll use to have 32-bit data loaded into register. We are already at the end of this class. We have small programming parts left, and we will complete that in the next class, and then we'll start looking into the hardware itself. So far, we have been only looking at the instruction set architecture. We are end of that. That is chapter 2 in the book. If there is a quick question, we can answer that, or otherwise we'll end here.
Sir, can you repeat the ORI line?
Yeah. See the ORI here. See in the LUI, load upper immediate, we have set the upper bits, the higher order bits with 61 is stored here. Now we really wanted to store this 61 and 2304 on the lower ones. So you know that the ORI we have been using to set some bits. We have been using the AND operation, AND immediate, to mask some bits, and ORI to set some bits. And here in the ORI, we have these bits. I have shown here this, maybe I should have shown blank here and then just showed this. And the third step, I could have shown this one. So this is the resultant one. So 2304 are the ones showed in the dark here. And that is ORed with the first one, and we get this. Any other questions? Okay, good. Simple things we are discussing, and hope that you read this, and we'll have Monday 15-minute quiz. We'll stop here. Thank you.